Hey everyone, Richard Norris here, and in today's video I'm going to talk about how to build a property portfolio whilst working alongside your full-time corporate job. So for those of you who don't know me, and for those of you who are new to my channel, my name's Richard Norris. I've successfully built a multi-million pound property portfolio, and I specifically made the transition from corporate employment into full-time property investor within 18 months, replacing £100,000 a year of a corporate income, which was about £5,000 net a month. So in today's video, I want to give you the 10-step thesis and the framework that I have used and that my clients will use to grow their property portfolios whilst working alongside their corporate job, with the number one goal to replace your income from your corporate job and build out your successful property portfolio. So the very first thing I want you to understand in this video today is that these are practical advice. I want you to take practical notes. I want you to take advice, actionable steps that you can really go out there and follow this video, take the guidance, the practical guidance, take the action, and really start to grow your property portfolios. So the very first thing that I really want to introduce you to in the 10-step thesis is understanding your personal budget. So the very first thing that you need to do is you need to set a personal budget. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, most people, in my experience, having worked with thousands of clients over the years, when I ask them, what is your financial independence figure? They just don't know to the penny. And it's absolutely critical in the process that the very first thing that you understand is understand your own balance sheet and understand your budget. You need to be tracking your finances every single month, because what gets tracked gets done. Some people would even suggest and recommend that you track your finances every day, your income and your expenditure. So the very first thing I want you to do is take out a spreadsheet. We're going to look at like your basic balance sheet. So literally, what do you spend a month to live? Things like your rental payments, your mortgage payments, your car, fuel, just generic expenses that basically what I would call your living expenses. Once you know what that number is, that is what we call our financial independence number, our financial freedom figure. And the very first thing that we're going to do is understand that. We're going to look at ways to generate income from our property portfolio that's going to replace that number. Okay, so now we know what our personal budget figure is. We need to reverse engineer that number. And I have a two-step process to financial independence, okay? Now, the very first step that you're going to take is you're going to say, okay, what is my financial independence figure? Remember, that figure is not what you want it to be. It's like, what is my basic living expenses? Now, for some people, let's say that the average wage in the UK is around 36,000 a year. So for this example, let's say that your personal budget, your personal financial independence number is 3,000 a month, £36,000 a year. We take the £36,000 a year and we divide that by 20%. We reverse engineer the maths, which means we now know how much we need to invest in terms of capital allocation. So in that example, where we need to say, well, we need to invest £180,000 of capital in order to get £36,000 back per year if we're leveraging at 75% mortgages, okay? So that's how you reverse engineer that calculation. The second step in the process, this is where we start to go for step 2, and we start to take that financial independence number, which is our basic living expenses, and we start to stretch it, and we say, okay, well, what do we actually earn? What do we actually earn from corporate employment? Now, for some of you watching this video, if it was anything like me, my number was $5,000 a month, which is like £100,000 a year of gross corporate salary. So you're going to take that £5,000 number a month, you're going to times that by 12 to get you 60,000 of net cash flow per year, and you're going to times that by 20%. Because typically, on average, if you're following what I teach you in this video, what myself and my clients achieve, we expect a minimum of 20% return on our investments, okay? By doing a buy, refurbish, refinance strategy, which I'm going to explain as we go throughout this video today. But once you understand that, you can reverse engineer, okay, well, if I want to get a 60,000 a year and I divide that by 20%, that means that I need £300,000 of capital to invest to get a £60,000 net a year of income from the property portfolio. At that point, you now know that if I'm making £5,000 a month from my property portfolio every single month, and I was making £5,000 a month from my corporate employment, at that point, you're now able to quit your job. Now, you do need to allow some contingency and some buffer within that. So I always allow 20% above that figure, because obviously when you're running a property portfolio, you're running a property rental business, you sometimes get voids, you sometimes, it's not always a linear, flat income, you're going to get a little bit of transient nature. So you need to allow for contingencies within the business. And of course, you don't want to strip out the whole cash flow from day one, because that's going to stop you from growing the property portfolio. So they're the very first two things that you need to do. So now that you've set your personal budget and you understand what your financial independence figure is, you know what your living expenses are, you know what your desired cash flow outcome is, following this two-step process, because you know what you're going to replace your income with from work, you can now move on to what we call my third step in the process, which effectively covers 3 steps, and I call it the SAP framework. SAP, strategy, area, property. So the first thing you want to do is you want to figure out, based on your desired outcome, so in this example, let's say it's 60,000 a year net that you want to get, 5,000 a month. If that's your desired outcome, you want to figure out what is the best property strategy for me to execute on to achieve that number in the time frame that you want. So for some people, it could be buy-to-let. For some people, it could be an HMO. And when we say an HMO, what do we mean by that? Well, an HMO is typically classified as 3 or more unrelated occupants sharing a property and sharing communal facilities, okay? So 3 or more people. Now we can break that down and get granular, because to some areas it's 5 or more people, depending on which license we need. There's mandatory licensing and selective licensing or additional licensing, depending on which area you invest in the UK. But to keep things semi-simple for the purpose of this video, just understand that HMO, a house of multiple occupation, is when you have at least 3 or more unrelated occupants sharing a property, renting a room in that property, and sharing the communal facilities, such as maybe bathrooms. Sometimes you're putting en suites, and sometimes you have communal facilities such as your kitchen and shared living areas, okay? So that was what I mean by an HMO. And then maybe you'll do serviced accommodation, which is where you rent a room on a short let for maybe 2 days at a time, a night by a time, a week at a time, or you can do commercial property. Now, in this video, again, like I said, I want to make it really practical and really help you to understand things. So the number one thing that you need to know when you're doing this framework, the strategy area property framework, is the model that we're going to be using to scale the business is we're going to be buying properties, we're going to be adding value via refurbishment, and we're then going to refinance those properties at a higher value, and we're going to pull most of the money that we put into the property back out so we can keep recycling the cash, so on and so forth, to grow the property portfolio. That's typically how myself and my clients continue to scale our property portfolios today, and that really is the kind of traditional strategy that large property investors use to grow their property portfolios to 200, 300, 400, 500 properties, okay? So understanding that any of those strategies, buy-to-let, HMO, service accommodation, commercial to residential developments, for example, taking a property, splitting it into apartments and residential use class flats, you must understand that you're always going to be adding value and doing some type of refurbishment truly if you want to get financially free and grow a property rental business. Now, for the purpose of this video, I really want to break down roughly what you kind of can expect to achieve using a buy, refurbish, refinance model from each of the strategies. So if you were to do a buy-to-let property, a traditional 2-bed terrace property, let's say, and you were to buy the property, add the value and refinance it, pull in your money that you put in back out, okay, you're roughly going to see a net cash flow of around £200 a month based on current interest rates at sort of 5%, okay? Now, obviously interest rates can vary, but for the purpose of this video, interest rates right now are around 5.5%, okay? So that's the typical cash flow you'll see. So you can say, well, £200 a month and I need to get to 5,000 a month. Well, if that was your only strategy, then it's going to take you a lot of properties in order to get to that £5,000 a month, right? It's going to be like 25, 30 properties for you to hit that number. So then you can say, well, what about if I did a title split or a flat split, where I took a property and I split it into a ground floor and a first floor flat under what we call permitted development rights? Well, you could double your cash flow in that situation because you're effectively doing 2 buy-to-lets in one transaction, and you're typically going to get £400 to £500 a month of net cash flow on that strategy. So again, in the example, to get to 5,000 a month, we would typically need anywhere between 10 to 12 properties to hit that sort of cash flow with that strategy. The next strategy, for example, HMOs, typically speaking, if you convert an HMO from maybe a 3-bedroom property to sort of a 5, 6, 7, up to 8 bedroom property, you can expect to see £750 a month of net cash flow around about a 5-bed property. And if you go all the way up to like an 8-bed property, you can see margins of around £1,500 net cash flow per month, sometimes slightly more depending on the area that you invest in. Now again, that will determine the number of properties that you actually need to hit that cash flow. So for example, if I was to do 3 to 8 bed HMO strategy, let's say for example, well, I'm going to do that, when I'm making £1,500 of net cash flow per property, then you only need sort of 3 or 4 properties and you're financially free, right? You can quit your job, you've covered your 3,000 monthly expenses, you're making 5,000, okay? Now that's super important because the reason I talk about this contingency and having this buffer between your financial independence figure of basic living expenses of 3,000 and the desired outcome, which is replacing my corporate salary of 5,000, is because the very first thing we need to do, remember as property investors, we're building wealth. The very first thing we need to do is to get into understanding Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what he talks about is in order to achieve your basic needs, you need to have food and shelter as the bottom part, and then you need to have safety, which is savings. Now, 5,000 a month is probably going to be like, if you're 3,000 a month living expenses, you've got 2,000 of disposable income to A, enjoy some parts of your life, and B, to maybe have savings. So at 5,000 a month, you would say in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first base of the triangle, food, shelter, safety and savings, is kind of met. And that's what we're trying to achieve. In the very first part of building out your property portfolio and looking to quit your corporate job, we need to build in step 1 and step 2 of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay? Now, if you think about commercial property and you want to go down the commercial property route, again, we can do that. We can start with that. Some of you watching this video may have a pension, okay? And maybe you've got a SAS pension or a SIP pension, different types of pensions that you can invest into property. Or maybe you've got a defined benefit pension with your employer and you can convert that into a SAS or a SIP pension, okay? But my point is, if you were to go down the commercial property route, you're going to probably see, again, depending on the type of acquisition, but let's just talk about typical commercial property in the northwest of the UK, you're probably going to see a net cash flow of around £500 to £1,000 per month, again, depending on what type of commercial asset class you go into, whether it's offices, whether it's retail, whether it's a shop, whether it's a cafe, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's, you know, a hotel, it will depend, okay? So with that being said, like that kind of helps you to understand that framework around your strategy and diversification. Then you can start to work out, okay, if I want to get to 5,000 a month and I do 3 5-bed HMOs, which make me £1,000 a month, that's 3,000. How am I going to make the other 2,000 up? Well, you may decide to flip a couple of properties to make up that additional 24,000 for that year, and you'd still come in with the 5,000. So this is where we can get very granular at the micro level to get the macro level and take it to the micro level. That's how I would be thinking about, how do I quit my job? How do I actually start this and then choose a strategy based on my desired cash flow that I want to achieve in a dedicated, predetermined time frame. Now, once you've decided on your strategy, the next thing we need to do is get laser focused on the area, okay? So in order to do this, we need to understand, okay, how do we go out and find our area? How do we know what's the right area to invest in? Now, if you're somebody who lives in the south of the UK, I'm originally from Oxford, so house prices in Oxford are very high. There's a high entry point, you get a low yield, maybe between 3 to 5%, and your return on investment's never going to be any more really than sort of 6 to 8% at best. Even if you're doing a buy, refurbish, refinance model, you're going to tie up large amounts of capital, take lower returns, so it's going to cap your growth. So for me, when I first started my property portfolio, I had to invest outside of where I lived, and I had to invest in the northwest of the UK. Now, my investment area in the UK specifically, when I first started making this transition from corporate employee, to property investor, I went over to, like I say, the northwest and invested in around the Manchester area. And the reason I did that is because I need to know that the numbers work. And the way you do that is you're going to go over to Rightmove. You can use Property Data, which is a software tool that links in with Rightmove as well. You can maybe use some of the data from Zoopla, but my number one go-to tool is Rightmove. So you can go to Rightmove, you can check out the average house price, so the mean average house price in that area for any given strategy. So let's say we're just looking for buy-to-lets, we're going to look at how much is the average house price for a 2-bed terrace property in, let's say, Salford, Eccles, Wigan, Warrington. And we're going to start running postcode analysis to find out what is the average house price and what is the average rent. Once I know that, I call that my house price to rental ratio. And I want to see sort of 7% plus yield, especially in today's market where interest rates are around 5-6%. My yield needs to be north of 7% in order to create that margin. And what I'll do is I'll reverse engineer that into working out, okay, if I was to buy a property at average asking price, according to Rightmove's data, and I was to rent it out at average asking price, what is the return on investment that I expect to receive? Okay, now your return on investment is effectively worked out by your annual net cash flow. So your net monthly cash flow, your rent minus your mortgage minus what we call your monthly operating expenses minus your management fees to give you a net cash flow. We times that by 12 to give us our annual cash flow. And then we divide that by the money that we leave in a property. Now, if you're doing a traditional strategy and just putting down 25% deposit, you're going to realize very, very quickly that you can't really get above 10%, 15% maximum return on investment. So if we're looking for those higher return on investment, those 20, 25, 30% returns, well, we really need to be buying properties at a discount, adding value, refurbishing the property and refinancing to pull that cash back out so that we can move on to the next property, so on and so forth, so we can keep scaling. But we still need to make sure that upon refinance, upon the exit, that we still got a good, healthy cash flow that I talked about previously in the video. So once you know your area, now you can start to double down, because most people that I see, the biggest mistake that property investors make when they come is they don't know their numbers and they don't know the things that I've just talked to you about. They've never thought about it at the micro level. And if you don't know your numbers, it's impossible to achieve the goals that you have with a laser focused, what I would call monk-like discipline strategy. You need to build a business plan, and you need to get really clear and defined around your goals and how you're going to go and do that. So once you know that, you can build a financial model, you can then select the right area for you. Because if you don't know what is the right area where the numbers are going to work, what most people will do is just make a decision based on a limiting belief. I'm going to invest where I live because that's where I know and that's where I feel most comfortable. Does it mean it's necessarily the best area for me to invest in? On data, it would probably suggest that it's not. Like, for example, Oxford is just never going to work depending on your capital amount unless you've got £2-3 million to invest, which again, most people watching this video just won't have that sort of capital allocation to start. Then you need to be looking at those areas where you know the numbers are going to work. Otherwise, what you end up doing is you'll spend hours of your time trying to find deals in an area where the numbers just don't work. And that's the biggest kind of takeaway and the biggest lesson that I can give you, because that's honestly, frankly speaking, the biggest mistake I see most people make. So the next thing you need to do in your area, once you know what strategy you're going to use, so if you're going buy to let, HMO or service accommodation, you find the area where that strategy works, and then you're going to build out the local infrastructure. You're going to look at, okay, what is the local infrastructure like? Let's take an HMO strategy, for example. We're going to look at what is the local infrastructure. Is there local hospitals nearby? Where are the tenants coming from? Is there local universities nearby? What sort of legislation is in place? Is there any prohibitive legislation such as Article 4 that's going to impact me from putting my strategy there? Is the area saturated or is it concentrated? If it's saturated, maybe that means that there's too many HMOs on the market and there's basically not enough people looking for rooms. Okay, so maybe we've got 100 rooms available on the market and we've only got 20 people looking for rooms. Well, it might not be the best idea to go and invest and develop out an HMO model in that area if that's what the statistics say. Now, you can get high-level statistics from Spare Room. It's not 100% accurate, but when you're doing your area analysis for like an HMO strategy, that's like another kind of platform that I use to kind of gauge that high-level data of concentration versus saturation. Now, again, just to be really granular and micro with this, I want to pack this full of value so you can take away and really start to implement these things without overwhelming you. You could also say, well, okay, well, what about if I'm going down another route? I'm going down like a Serco model where I'm renting these HMOs to basically housing association where we're housing asylum seekers, okay? Then you're going to go down a route where you need to find an area where the number's going to work for professional tenants, but you're going to find a route where if it gets saturated, would a housing company, a local housing association like Serco, take this property off me? And then you're going to be starting to speak to the likes of Serco and you're going to start to reach out to them and you're going to get their procurement list. So it's like we want to know where Serco, for example, in this example, where do Serco want to acquire properties? okay? Is it Barrow-in-Furness? Is it Warrington? Is it the Wirral? Is it Wigan? Is it St Helens? Where's open? Where do they need properties right now? And again, that's what we call product market fit. So all of these variables, when you're trying to find your area, are things that you need to look at. With that being said, the next step in the process of my 10-step thesis is we want to know what property type that we're going to buy. So again, the property type is determined on what strategy we're going to use, what area we're going to use, okay? But really the type is based on the strategy. So if I'm looking to, say, convert 3 beds into 6, 7 bed HMOs, and that's my strategy, well, I'm going to be looking for properties that I can buy under market value. So properties that are kind of tired, a little bit distressed, need some work doing to them. You know, is there an opportunity to do a loft conversion? Is there an opportunity to extend out the back under permitted development rights? How can I maximize the space in this property? Now, typically speaking for an HMO strategy, the best type of properties are older Victorian buildings, sort of your older Victorian buildings where you've got high ceilings, quite large rooms. These make for great HMOs because you've got a lot of space to work with where you can put in en suites and sometimes even kitchenettes as well. So you kind of create little studios within the co-living space. So you kind of, sometimes some of my clients that you're going to see at the end of videos when I share some of their results, they're doing this and it's working very, very well. They're converting 3-bed properties into sort of 7-bed studios where they're putting in an ensuite and a kitchenette. So they're looking for those bigger, more Victorian type properties. So the property type that you look for will be dependent on your strategy. Again, if you're looking for just a buy-to-let, well, you're going to be typically looking for a 2 or 3 bed terrace property. If your entry price into the market is you can only buy properties between 70, 80, 90, say 100K, you're really going to be wanting to look in the northwest, northeast of the UK for those 2-3 bed terrace properties. They're going to be your best bet for doing a buy, refurbish, refinance model on a buy-to-let property. So your property type really depends on the strategy selection, which is part of the SAP framework. That's why we go strategy, then we go area, and then we go property, okay? And that's the formula that I want you to use and I want you to follow. And I want you to think about that as you start to develop your own financial model and your own financial property plan to financial independence, to quit your corporate job. So step 7 in my 10-step thesis is, now that we've got all of those things, the foundations laid, okay, the strategy, the area, the property, we're going to start to look at lead generation, which is how to find off-market deals. Because really the secret recipe is to buy properties at a discounted price. We want to buy properties at a discounted price, we want to then add the value, and then we want to refinance. So how do we buy properties at a discounted price? Well, we need a lead generation strategy to do that. And the way that we create a lead generation strategy is that we can go to auction, we can go direct to vendor. We want to find motivated sellers. Okay, and motivated sellers will maybe be people that are going through a repossession, maybe they've fallen into negative equity, maybe they're in arrears, maybe they're going through a divorce. So we need to have a lead generation system, the specific laser focused system that's going to bring us the exact property types that we want to buy in the right area that are product market fit for our individual unique personal set of parameters. Now that will vary for every individual watching this video. That unique financial model varies. And when I'm working with my clients inside our programs, in our mentorship, everything we do is bespoke and tailored to the individual, and we build them out custom plans, okay? And that's why everyone will have a different strategy, a different area, and a different property type for what they want to do. And then we'll focus on the lead generation strategy that's going to work for them to acquire these off-market deals to their desired ROI. What's the return on investment that they need? How much capital do they need to put in to get the output that they need, i.e. the income that they need to generate month on month? Okay, and that will depend on your lead generation system, the lead generation strategy that we use to implement. Okay, step 8 in the thesis. This is probably the most fundamental one. Now that you've got the foundations in place, the next thing you need to think about is your tax structure. What is going to be the best tax vehicle for you to buy properties? Again, the biggest mistake that property investors make is they usually buy properties in their personal name. Okay, and they own a privately owned rental business, they pay the higher rate taxpayers, they've got a Section 24 income tax problem where they're paying 40% on the gross rental profits, not being able to deduct any of the mortgage interest. They get a 20% relief at the end. They have capital gains tax at 24% on disposal of the assets, and they also pay 40% inheritance tax because those properties are all inside of their estate. And believe it or not, even if you buy these properties in a normal off-the-shelf limited company, you're making another mistake. It's like taking all of your hard-earned money and putting it into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, because you're just going to create big inheritance tax problems as you scale the property portfolio. So you need to be thinking about what is important to you. Okay, what does your unique tax structure look like? And this is where you need an accountant, a tax consultant who's going to help you to map out your individual tax structure for the goals that you want to achieve over the long term. Now, the biggest mistake that people make is they go to an accountant for tax advice. And the problem with that is an accountant looks at the past. They report your past financial affairs for that accounting period. Okay, and how much you've got to pay in corporation tax, how much you have to pay on your SA 302 self-assessment income tax forms, and they try and trim your taxes a little bit using legitimate HMRC tax rules and regulations. But an accountant isn't a tax advisor. So a tax advisor looks at the future, looks at, okay, well, we want to grow this property portfolio to £10 million, great, and we want to make £1 million a year net profit. What is the best structure for our client that we can put in place today as a foundation that's going to be able to scale out and not cause tax liabilities at growth? And that's where things like family investment companies that we set up for our clients come in, because at that level you're going to have huge inheritance tax bills, whereas things like family investment companies will stop you and mitigate you from having any inheritance tax on all future acquisitions if you set them up in the right way. It's really important, I can't emphasize this point enough. Step 8, you need to understand what is the exact tax structure that you're going to set up to meet your desired personal goals within your property portfolio, so that it becomes scalable and you're not building in tax liabilities as you scale and bloating out the costs. Because it's not about how much money you make. The only thing that's truly important in life and in business is how much money you keep, and out the money that you keep that you can multiply. And it's that bottom part of the equation which is really how you build wealth. Step 9 of the thesis is refurbishment. Understanding how to refurbish properties, how to calculate the refurbishments, how to go out there and select the right build team to do this for you with building contractors. And again, my candid advice to you, I see this all the time when people start out trying to quit their corporate job. They end up with the mindset that I need to work really hard in order to make money. Because over here in their corporate job, if they're earning even $50,000 a year, arguably they're still working 40 hours a week. They're trading time for money, and they bring that mindset into the business, which is I'm going to do the works myself, refurbish the properties myself to save money. What they don't realize is that the money that they're saving on the refurbishment is actually their time. And their time costs money. Now, the best thing you can do as a business owner is learn how to delegate, how to leverage, and how to leverage your time. Now, if you don't know how to leverage your time as a business owner, you're going to end up capping yourself. And it's going to take you 12 months to do a refurb, which will take my team just 2 months to do, for example. And there's key 2 revenue generating habits that are going to move the needle to help you grow your property portfolio as fast as possible to get out of the corporate environment. And that is finding properties below market value, getting good at finding deals, and the second thing is getting good at raising finance. So I want you to understand that whenever you're doing a refurbishment project, number 1, implement a builder's contract. Number 2, make sure you understand how to qualify the builders and vet the builders and make sure they're qualified to do the refurbishment at that cost. Understand what their credentials and cash flows look like, because most builders sometimes over leverage on cash flow. And then the last thing is I want you to understand that you're going to use project management systems and processes to manage those refurbishments. And I know this might kind of spook you a little bit and might sound a little scary if you're just trying to find your very first property, but like I do 18-month £1 million+ refurbishments in the UK, and I'm living in Dubai, 4,500 miles away. The way I do that is using systems and processes, standard operating procedures as a businessman, running it as a business, using builder's contract and having the builders be liable and sign the terms and conditions of those contracts. So it's about managing the expectations so that you can get the works done on time to budget. Step 10 in the process of the thesis is refinance and exit strategies. What you need to get really good at is understanding how you're going to refinance the property after you've added the value to pull the cash out, and then what is your exit strategy? Are you going to sell it on for profit? And you need more than one exit strategy, by the way. You can refinance it, take as much money as you can out, leave the property cash flowing, put some tenants in and rent it out. You must be able to if you can't get the tenants or something goes wrong or it's not working as you thought it was going to work, let's say, for example, it's only 60% occupancy, but you thought the HMO was going to operate 100%, well, you need to have done the deal and worked out that, well, there's a margin here where if it's not working, I could sell it for profit. And then if I can't rent it out as a professional HMO, can I get maybe asylum seekers in there? Is there a local housing contractor that I can put in there under a 5-year lease? Is there like just a normal standard DSS kind of route where the social housing, the local government need to house these people? We've done some of those contracts. They've been some of the best contracts that we've done with our clients. We've done one over in Portsmouth, and we converted it, a care home, into a 12-bed HMO, and we signed it with a 10-year lease with Portsmouth Council. They pay us every month regardless of how tenants are in there or not, and it's all benefit tenants because there's a shortage of housing for these types of people. So as long as you've got 2, 3, 4 exit strategies on the deal, you're going to either be able to refinance that deal, which is the number one thing you want to do, keep it in the portfolio, sell for profit, or you're always going to have an exit route. So they're the 10-step thesis. Now, lastly, I really want to talk to you about some client case studies that have happened recently within the business in the last 12 months and share with you how this model is actually working for our clients, not just me, for our clients. So the first person I want to talk to you about is a lady called Anastasia. So Anastasia joined our program, and she was one of these people that needed to go out and really, she needed to start from scratch. She had a small amount of capital to start with. Okay, let's say less than £50,000 to get the first deal done. And so what we recommended that Anastasia did was that we recommended that she went down the wholesaling route. So we said, okay, let's go and find some properties for other investors that are cash rich but time poor, package them up and sell them on. And at the same time, you can charge a project management fee. We helped her to do that. And within her first 12 months, she was able to find 6 profitable deals, sell those on to investors, some within inside our community, some outside of the community. And she was able to do 6 deals within her first 12 months, charging between 5 to 10K per deal. So making 30 to 60,000 pounds from sourcing on and wholesaling 6 deals in her first 12 months. Now that didn't cost or require Anastasia to put any money into the property business. That just required her time. Then what she was able to do is she was able to build up some capital so she could make her very first profitable property investment, and we helped her to buy her first HMO. And it was a 4-bedroom HMO in Kettering that delivers 20% plus ROI. Now, the second type of client that we've helped is husband and wife called Pranav and Lace. And they came to the program with a lot of equity. They made the decision to sell assets to release the equity because they realized that financial perspicacity, that actually the money was tied up costing them money. So they decided to release and sell the asset to generate this lump sum of cash. And by doing so, they're now on track to hit £300,000 a year of income from their property portfolio within their first 3 years of working with us. That's the current future pacing for 2026. So let's talk about what they've achieved within the last 12 to 14 months of working with us, okay, since 2023. Here's the first deal that they brought. They've actually done 3 deals, and I'm going to look at the numbers here so I can get this right and tell you the exact deals that they've done. So the first deal they did, it completed on the 10th of April. That's when it was finished, refurbished, and they got a 13% return on that. And that was over in Bristol, and it was a 6-bedroom home, 6-bedroom HMO. They did a cash-in mortgage out strategy. Again, like I say, a 6-bedroom HMO. The tenant was a company called Ready Homes in the southeast of England. Southwest, Bristol Southwest. Good job, I'm in property and not geography, right? So southwest of England. And they purchased the property for £330,000. They spent £85,000 on the refurbishment. And the total spend after all fees and taxes was £436,990. And the sales valuation, so the gross development value, after they've done the refurbishment works, is £550,000. So technically, if they chose to sell this property as a flip, there's a gross profit margin before sales disbursements of around about £110,000 to £115,000 of profit. What they actually chose to do is refinance that property, rented it out to Ready Homes as a 6-bed HMO, and it's now bringing them in £37,200 of net income per annum, giving them a 13% return. And what they've actually decided to do as well, Remember, business isn't static. This is another lesson I want to teach you. You need to be adaptable, not rigid. Is they've now decided to turn this property into a children's home, and they've got approval on that. And they're setting it up as a children's home for 3 kids. And it's a very, very profitable strategy. Sure, there's been lots of legislation to work through, lots of challenges, lots of nuances to get this set up. But they're now in the process of changing this property that was originally working very, very nicely for them with Ready Homes, and have adapted it onto a children's home model, which is going to be more profitable for them, giving them an infinite return once they're on that model. Now, the second deal that they brought, they were able to raise £75,000 of investment. Number one, they was able, through going through our program, they were able to raise £75,000 of private investment to put into deal number 2. Again, it was a cash-in mortgage out strategy. It's a 6-bedroom HMO with Ready Homes in Bristol, and they took it from a 2-bed terrace to a 6-bedroom property. The market value was £275,000. They managed to purchase the property for £255,000. So they're able to get a 20% discount on the day that they brought. They spent £100,000 on the refurbishment. It rents out for £3,090 per month, and it net cash flows per year after all expenses £18,204. And the return on investment at an interest rate of 6.5% at 75% loan to value is 17% return. Now, the last deal, deal number 3, is again, it's a 6-bed HMO property. It's with Ready Homes. It's in Bristol. It was a 3-bed terrace that they're converted into a 6-bed HMO. The market value was $260,000. They managed to negotiate $20,000 off the asking price again, bought it for $240,000. They're renting out for $3,100. The build cost was £100,000, and it net cash flows £21,039 per year. And the return on investment at a 5.5% interest rate is a 20% return at a 65% loan to value upon exit. So the total net cash flow from these 3 properties that Pranav and Lays have done within a 12 to 18 month period is £76,443 per year. Okay, we have other truly amazing stories. Another one is a guy called Paresh. He had 4 properties in his personal name. He had a lot of tax liabilities. He was paying capital gains tax on disposal at 24%. He had a Section 24 income tax problem. He also had a huge inheritance tax liability. We were able to restructure his 4 properties into a better vehicle to then move them into incorporate into a family investment company. We set up a family investment company with him, and he's now acquired 7 new properties within the last 24 months of working with us. So he's gone from 4 to 11, and he recently posted inside the community saying he's now doing 6 deals in the last 2 months. Okay, and on some of his deals, he's getting an infinite return on his investment. What does that mean? It means that he's pulling all of the money that he put into that property back out, and it's cash flowing. And he's doing strategies like 3 beds to 7-bed conversions over in Peterborough, using a strategy which is all en suites, kitchenettes. He's doing things with Serco over in Barrow and Furness, over in areas like Cumbria, and he's making 25-30% plus on those as well. So he's using a combination of strategies. And currently Paresh, let's just check his numbers here. He's currently doing, from working with us within those 2 years, he's doing a total net cash flow of £81,000 per year. I mean, this works. This works, right? Not only have I done it for myself, but I've also helped numerous clients do it for themselves, okay? So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you can take practical, actionable steps, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button, because we're going to be pumping out more content on the channel. Subscribe, like this video, really helps us to get the algorithms going and get more people seeing our work. I'll be hugely grateful if you could do that. And drop any comments in the questions below. If you've got any questions, in the comments below, drop us any comments, drop us any questions that you've got about this video. I'll go in and answer them personally. At the same time, if you want to book in a consultation with my team, the link's going to be below as well. And if you want to start getting financially independent, quitting your job and having results like Anastasia, Pranav and Lays and Paresh, then feel free to click that link, and we'll see if we can help. See you in the next one.